Welcome to Balancing the Scales, the Economic Justice Report. This is your host, Vic Bernsdorf, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about these two topics. We're talking about the whistleblower Wendell Potter and what works better, Germany's Kurtzarbeit program or America's response of dealing with the coronavirus their own way. Before we get to those two topics, I had a question from viewer Jesse in Lathrop. Asked me, Vic, how can we protect ourselves against propaganda? Okay, so Jesse, let's start with the definition of what propaganda is. Okay, propaganda, you can look it up. Any definition has the same thing. Propaganda is an opinion deliberately designed to fool people. Okay, I'll say it again. It's an opinion. Propaganda is an opinion deliberately designed to fool people to act in certain ways. Now, the person who creates the propaganda does not want any careful analysis or scrutiny of what they're trying to tell you. They just want a specific action from you. Okay? They want their propaganda to fool you, okay, or us. Okay? Now, Nazi Germany had an incredibly effective propaganda system. And the man's name was Joseph Goebbels, and he had very incredible, powerful propaganda techniques that fooled his audience to a great extent. And those techniques, almost all of them, are being used now by the Fox so-called news network and other right-wing media. Okay? Let me quote some of his most famous propaganda quotes. Okay? Just to give you an idea of the thinking that went on with this man, Joseph Goebbels. First quote. Propaganda works best when those who are being manipulated or fooled are confident they are acting on their own free will. End of quote. Second quote from Dr. Joseph Goebbels. The bigger the lie, the more it will be believed. Okay? And I think the best one that he ever created was this. And I quote from Dr. Joseph Goebbels. The most brilliant propagandist technique will yield no success unless one fundamental principle is born in the mind consistently. It must confine itself to a few points and repeat them over and over again. End of quote. Okay? Now, those three quotes I just reiterated to you, right, from Dr. Joseph Goebbels, those are typical of what things that our Fox News network uses all the time. Okay? Now, let's have a look at propaganda in practice as it relates to Obamacare. Okay? Let's watch this video, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Tracking survey from March that found the same thing at work. So whenever they asked questions about specific provisions in Obamacare, they got overwhelmingly positive responses. Over 75% of respondents liked the law's insurance subsidies. 80% favor the statewide insurance marketplaces. 88% approve of the small business tax credits to help pay for employees' health coverage. Pre-existing conditions is wildly popular. Banning lifetime caps, the same thing. But when you ask generally, are you in favor of Obamacare, the dirty word, boom, support drops tremendously. Some polls have it as low as 49%, not even a simple majority. So why is that? Well, the Republicans have done such an amazingly effective job at propagandizing Obamacare that they've essentially won. They've won in the public forum. They've won the battle of ideas. Now, of course, they didn't win the battle of policy because Obamacare is law, and they didn't win the battle of reality because Obamacare is objectively better than what we had beforehand. But people's gut reactions now are, oh, Obamacare, I don't want that. That's bad. If you say enough times they're going to pull the plug on grandma, if you say death panels enough, if you talk about the government bureaucrat getting in between the average Joe and his doctor, guess what? People start to believe it.
Okay, folks, so I hope that clip that presented propaganda from Kyle Kalinski's perspective, that said it all, folks. That says it all for me, you know? And that's really true. The Republicans and conservatives have really done a great job in manipulating people's minds to believe that Obamacare is something that they don't want. Okay? Now, then the question comes up, what can we do to protect ourselves from propaganda? How do we know we're being lied to? How can we protect ourselves from constant attacks from the right or conservative media? And I say conservative media because find left-wing propaganda, okay? I can't find it, okay? Please, go out, find left-wing propaganda here in America that continually creates lies, and I'll be happy to eat my words. And I'll go out online and I'll tell I was wrong. So, email me and whatever you find on left-wing propaganda. But you'll find it from conservative media sources, Fox News especially. So, the question now is, how can we prevent yourself from believing the lie? What can you do? What you're listening to is a truth or a lie? Okay, well, this is what I do. We need to seek out viewer or reader-funded non-profit news sources. Like what? Like Free Speech TV, or the People.org, or TNR, the Real News Network. Okay? Anything where the people have to pay to have the news provided for them versus having it come to them from free from corporate sources. Because corporations have an agenda. They want to make money. Then they want to manipulate you to think in certain terms and vote in certain ways, right? To help them, not you. Okay? So again, if you seek out reader-funded non-profit news sources where there's no profit motive involved, right? Or no private agenda involved, that's one way. You know, you can make sure you're getting the real news, okay? Second thing we got to do, well, we all have to get involved in politics. Politics is not a spectator sport, okay? Politics affects every facet of your life, okay? And number three, we need to all become critical thinkers, okay? For example, start thinking in terms of, why are they targeting me with this ad, okay? Who is behind this ad that you see on TV or the news or here on the radio station or you read on the newspaper, okay? And if I do what they want, who will this help and who will it hurt, okay? That's the kind of analysis you have to do these days because we're being attacked, okay, on a daily basis, folks, okay? Okay, so thanks for that great question, Jesse. And now on to the first economic justice story. Okay, this story I titled Whistleblower in the Spotlight, Wendell Potter. This information comes to you from markets.businessinsider.com, and let's give you an overview of what this is about, who Wendell Potter is. Wendell Potter is the former head of corporate communications at Cigna Health Insurance Company, and he's the current CEO of Medicare for All Now. That's a non-profit group that advocates for a universal healthcare system like Medicare for All or like the systems they have all over Europe, particularly in the Nordic countries. Let's watch a video of Wendell Potter talking about his former life, basically promoting the private healthcare system in the United States, and what do you have to say now about it, okay? Come right back and talk about it.
The insurance industry would love to sell very skimpy plans and let people think that they're getting some good deal. Here's another thing I think that lawmakers need to keep in mind. They're fixated on premiums, and that's because the insurance industry wants them and us to do that. They can sell, back in the old days, they could sell policies that had the appearance of being affordable. If you enrolled in those plans, though, and you got sick, you would be on the hook for thousands and thousands of dollars. It's why so many Americans file for bankruptcy even with insurance. They thought they had coverage that was decent, and they found out when they really needed it that it really wasn't. They were paying good money to insurance companies for a long time, and when they really needed those policies, they weren't worth anything.
Okay, folks, so that was Wendell Potter, former communication executive at Cigna Healthcare, who had a, let's call it a road to Damascus experience. If you're not familiar with that term, road to Damascus, check it out, it's from the Bible. But means a complete change of heart, 180 degrees. Now he's devoted to telling the American people the truth about the lies that he himself was paid to tell them when he was at Cigna and I think at Humana as well. Now, what changed his heart? He doesn't go into it in the video you saw, but I saw another video. He went to a RAM event. I talked about that in the previous show. Remember Stan Brock? He was from Wild Kingdom back in the 60s. He was in that show. And he creates all over the world. He created free healthcare events which were designed for third world countries, but because America has such lousy healthcare, so many millions of people needing healthcare, Stan brought his events over to here, to America, and I think at this point Wendell happened to be in Tennessee at the time, and he heard about the event, and he went to look at it, and what he saw he could not believe that in a first world country, people would be lining up, hundreds of people lining up with horrific medical conditions, lining up to get free medical treatment, glasses or teeth being repaired and cavities taken out, people who could never afford health care at all. And he turned white, or just a frame of just an expression. But yeah, I mean, he had a complete change of heart. And now he's on the other side of the healthcare system, promoting a Medicare for all system in America. So now let me give you some quotes from Wendell, and it shows you what kind of how truly he was converted, that we need a universal healthcare system in America. So let me give you some quotes from Wendell Potter. First one, he says, Canada has done a better job with their healthcare system. They make sure that everyone who needs to be treated is treated, and I felt that to provide some context, I needed to describe what I used to do for a living to try to scare people away from the Canadian healthcare system, because insurance companies fear that system. They know that if the U.S. moves to a healthcare system like Canada has, it would certainly put a crimp in their profits. End of the first quote. Here's another one. And I quote, here's the truth. Our industry lobbying group, AHIP, supplied my colleagues and me with cherry-picked data and anecdotes to make people think Canadians wait endlessly for their care. It's a total lie. And I always regret the disservice I did to folks on both sides of the border. End of quote. Okay? From Wendell Potter. And I quote, large healthcare insurers that I was part of will stop at nothing to keep their profits high. Lying to the American people is how we kept our profits high. The reality is that Medicare for all would give the American people more choices, not less. That's because Medicare does not limit the choice of healthcare providers that Medicare recipients can seek out for care. You could go to any doctor or hospital that accepts Medicare, which is virtually all hospitals. End of quote. Okay? Not just that, but current Medicare for all proposals would provide a way of budgeting to ensure that all hospitals, including rural hospitals, currently closed by the dozens in the private insurance market, can stay open. End of quote. Okay, so let's digest this, what he just said. Folks, a global yearly budget for hospitals and healthcare providers that Medicare for all would mean non-stop operation of hospitals. Pretty nice to have during a pandemic, don't you think? Well, guess what? That's not the case now. Okay? We got nurses, a bunch of other medical professionals being laid off or furloughed because most American hospitals are the for-profit type. They're basically businesses that make most of their money from elective procedures like hip replacements or whatever. And since people now, there's potential patients, right, are scared of getting COVID-19, the coronavirus, those patients aren't going to the hospital. They're not going to the hospital, so medical staff there needs to be furloughed or laid off during a pandemic of all times. Okay? Look, in this current pandemic situation where all the flaws of the American healthcare system are finally exposed for everyone to see, no more proof is needed to show that the American healthcare system is the worst in the developed world, folks. Okay? Okay, personal story now. This is from Vox.com, and let me just quote you from their article. When Vox healthcare reporter Sarah Cliff spent 15 months reviewing over 1,000 emergency room bills, she found outrageous bills for unsuspecting patients. One example of surprise billing, which is what it's called, was this. Get this. A patient called Scott Cohen was personally billed $7,924 for surgery for his broken jaw. What happened was, although he went to a hospital that was in network with his healthcare insurer, the surgeon who operated on him wasn't, and he wasn't notified ahead of time. That's why he got that huge bill, surprise billing. Okay? It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, folks. Just here in the greatest country on earth, right? Keep hearing that over and over again. Well, we're not great when it comes to healthcare. Another example. Jessica Pell was charged $5,751 for a New Jersey emergency room visit where her treatment for a cut ear consisted only of a single ice pack. That was it. Okay? Okay, so what's the big picture here? What's the takeaway from this show segment today? Look, those two stories I just told you about, those patients together, horrific surprise medical bills, they're just two stories out of millions of horrific healthcare related abuses that don't have to happen. They don't have to happen. In every other industrialized nation, those other governments, especially the Nordic countries, they provide their citizens with low-cost, universal healthcare that everyone pays for through the tax system, so outrageous, unexpected bills don't happen. They never occur. Okay? Look, citizens in those countries, they can sleep better at night. They can sleep well, knowing that they won't go bankrupt if they get sick. Okay? We do. We do have to worry about that in this country. For example, like if you go to a French doctor's office, their prices are listed on the door or in the room, that the examination room. They're listed. Okay? You won't find that here. Okay? Progressive Democrats, especially Bernie Sanders, have been trying to get us Medicare for all for years, but corporate Democrats and the entire Republican Party want nothing to do with that concept, right? Indeed, they label it as socialism, right, to try and scare and dissuade uninformed Americans from voting for it, right? Folks, we need to stop calling ourselves the greatest nation on earth unless greatness is defined. Unless greatness is defined by how much you prey upon, financially abuse, and inflict enormous emotional pain on your own citizens. Okay, so, on to the next story. This next story I call German Kurtzarbeit versus America's response to the coronavirus. Part of the information today comes to you from thehill.com, where I sourced a lot of my information from. Let me start by giving you an overview of the big picture here. Kurtzarbeit is a German program that Congress and the administration really should copy as they create some kind of legislation to deal with the economic consequences of the current coronavirus crisis. Kurtzarbeit. It's a system of federal government guarantees, employment guarantees, that Germany has created to reduce layoffs during recessions and economic emergency like they have now. Right? Kurtzarbeit, like I said, means short-term work. It's a German government program first used during the 2008 financial crisis that pays roughly 2/3 of an employee's salary to a company that would otherwise be forced to resort to employee layoffs because they have such a horrific economic downturn. Let's watch a video clip of Kurtzarbeit and come back and talk about it.
The effects of the global economic crisis are still being felt here, especially in the manufacturing sector. New orders were down 30% at this factory in Rastatt.
Personally, I was afraid, like all the workers here.
But the German government reacted quickly to keep workers employed without cutting their wages. The Kurtzarbeit, or short-time work program, enabled companies to reduce working hours. Employees were still paid for the hours not worked through partial government subsidies that were negotiated to cover up to 70% and in some cases 90% of their pay. Employees worked fewer hours, but the level of wages and benefits stayed the same. Sacrifices were made on all sides, but no one here was laid off, and the factory stayed open. If workers can keep earning, they can also keep spending.
Okay, the last sentence in the clip you just saw is the key to the whole program. Basically keeping people employed so they have income so they can spend and keep the economy humming. So let's take a closer look now and see what's going on with this Kurtzarbeit program. Okay, so by providing for staff to remain on the job, okay, even at reduced hours and salary, Kurtzarbeit benefits both the employers and the employees. Okay? The workers maintain a steady income, while companies avoid losing the skills that these workers have acquired over years with the firm, and which will be needed once the economy comes roaring back, or hopefully so, right? Among other benefits, the Kurtzarbeit program allows workers to stay on the job so they can maintain enough income to cover their cost for things like housing, food, and healthcare. Okay? That program, the Kurtzarbeit program, helps employees who are also consumers to accumulate enough income to help kickstart the economy. Like I said, once the economy comes out of the recession and goes back to full employment, right? Now, the reason the Republicans hate the idea of a Kurtzarbeit concept in general is, of course, because they're terrified that their voters will see the benefits of large government programs and also see the hypocrisy of Republican lawmakers providing those services, because you can't keep calling the government, right, the problem for 40 years and then create generous government backstop programs during economic emergencies to keep America's working and the economy humming along. It's hypocritical. Anyway, that would prove to the American people that government involvement in the economy has great value. And socialism, which is a system which has large economic programs, is in fact a good thing for the economy and for workers, right? That's exactly the opposite message the Republicans have been sending out. Like I said, for the last 40 years, they've been selling the concept that government is bad for you. Because you don't want government, you want less government in your life, okay? So, what's the takeaway from this segment on Kurtzarbeit? Well, beyond its economic benefits, Kurtzarbeit is a reminder of the importance of having a skilled workforce for economic success. Everyone knows that Germany has a lot of industrial strength. What few Americans know, however, is that through its extensive apprenticeship programs, German workers benefit from a hands-on, dual-track skills and education system. Okay? And get this, unlike in America, at the age of about, I think, 16 or so the students, the advisory person, and their teachers figure out what types of jobs that they are best at, given their history in their studies, right? And they advise them accordingly, whether they should go to a college or go to a vocational program, right? And get this, German education for Germans is either free or very low cost, whatever they decide to study, okay? One more thing, for German companies with over 2,000 employees, half of the members of the supervisory board of directors are elected by the employees. I'll say it again, are elected by the employees. So the employees' concerns get represented, and more often than not, good compensation packages are created for them as a result, right? It makes sense. It's basically a union, having union people represent you on the board of directors. Okay? Now, if the Trump administration really wants to help the Americans fight this coronavirus, a Kurtzarbeit program like the one Germany has is something worth looking at. But since it helps the average American, right? Not their donors, not their millionaire donors or corporate donors, the average American, let's face it, Republican lawmakers will never give the idea any attention whatsoever. Okay? Flat out won't. Well, that's the show for today, folks. Thanks for watching. Next week, I'm going to be talking about these three topics. I'm going to be talking about ideology always comes first, as far as the Republican Party is concerned. I'm going to be talking about Mark Pocan in my public service profile. Mark Pocan is a progressive Democrat. And finally, I'll be providing you with free educational resources that you could use to get a good job, where you don't have to really go to college and spend thousands of dollars. So, thanks for watching, and always remember, you deserve the government you vote for. Have a great day.